Now during this process we're going to be pushing brake fluid back up through the lines. So under the hood you're going to want to find your brake master cylinder reservoir and remove the cap so that the fluid can come back up into the system. We want to check this level too, that it's not overflowing.
Okay, so what we're going to do is break the lug nuts loose. We're not going to remove them at this point, but just break them loose, because if you lift the car first, the wheel spins as you try to break them loose. So when it's on the ground, it's easier for that. So 22 millimeter for this. For these lug nuts, we're just going to turn it a quarter turn on each of these. So we just lifted with the jack right there on the frame and put our jack stand a little bit more towards the front. And we didn't lift that high, just high enough to let the wheel spin so we can get the tire off. So now we'll just remove these and remove the wheel. Okay, so next we're going to remove the brake caliper so we can get the rotor off. So on the back side here, there's going to be two bolts that hold the brake caliper on. They're 18 millimeter. The top one there, and the bottom one right here. So just remove those two. Now sometimes these are on pretty tight, so you may need a nice breaker bar and even a hammer to break those loose. But I'd break one loose and then move to the second one before completely removing the bolt. Okay, so with those two bolts out of the back, you can slide the caliper off. And we have another jack stand here because you don't want to have it hang because it's bad on the cable there. So next we're going to remove the rotor and pull it off. Okay, next we sprayed some liquid wrench around here on the outside, and also on our T30 there's a little screw here, and that's a Torx. So it's like an Allen, but there's multiple points, so make sure you're using the correct one here. Once again, it's a T30, so you don't want to strip it out. So we're going to go ahead and just remove this. Okay, with that removed, now the rotor will come right off. You can set it aside.
Now this part was done on a different car, but it's the same process. You're basically just going to push the inside of the brake pad out from the backside, but you're going to leave the other one in that's closest to the pistons that we're going to be compressing here in a minute. And so we're going to get our brake tool, and basically what it is it's this little piece here and this piece here. This side is going to go up against the inside of the front of the brake caliper, and this side is going to thread through the back side of that part. So as you turn it here and spread it, eventually what's going to happen is it's going to be contacting on the old brake pad where the threads are. That's why we want to put the old brake pad and leave it in there, because we're using it. It's going to destroy the old brake pad, but anyway, it's going to use this to compress that piston back in. Now make sure that the cap is off on your reservoir for the brake master cylinder, because we're trying to push fluid back up through the lines, and we don't want to be hurting the boot that's on these pistons, which is why we're leaving this old pad back in there. So we're going to compress this one side at a time if you have the dual piston brakes. So we're go ahead and just turn this, and you can see now how the plate is against the outside of the caliper and the thread is now pushing on the old brake pad on the inside of the caliper. Now you want to keep an eye on that brake master cylinder fluid reservoir, because if fluid has been added to your brakes as they've worn down and you've noticed the level was low, then it could be overflowing right now. So to counter that, you can just get a squeeze bottle here and you can just spray it back into another bottle to lower that level. But then again, when the brakes are all done, we're going to want to check this level and make sure that the level does not drop low enough to where we're going to start getting air into our brake master cylinder area. Now note the hole marks that we've put into this old pad here from the tool, but once it's compressed on that side, now you're just going to pull that pad out as well. Same thing, you just pull it straight back. So compare your new ones to the old ones. Note those holes that kind of ruin those pads, but they're the old ones. That's why we did it that way. And we're just going to basically take our new pads. We're going to put grease on the back side of them where it contacts the pistons so that there's no screeching noises or anything. Transfer the clips from the old one back onto the new one, and you're going to slide it back in. Make sure that the clips go on all the way because they can be off, so make sure that those are good. And then we're really going to want to slide this back in with the composite side facing up. Obviously you don't want to put these in backwards, and so clips may vary slightly, but it's just do it the same way we did as removing them. We're going to also just put the grease on the back side of these so that it's not screeching any, and that's going to make it so it's nice and smooth. So I'm going to go ahead and line this back up and just push it straight back in. So that one's in, and we can put some paper over it to push on it so you're not getting it all greasy with your hands. And we're just going to slide the other one back in as well. Keep in mind the clips may be different, but it's the same process. They will slide out and they'll slide back in.
Put our rotor back on. You want to find that same hole. There's two of them. This is the clean one. That's the one that we had used. So we're going to go ahead and line these up so that they match up again. Okay. That one breaks parts cleaner. I'm going to clean off the rotor anywhere you touched it, both sides. Okay, now we're just going to slide our caliper back over. And then the top and bottom bolts go back in. I'm going to go ahead and put some Loctite on these. Okay, so take your bolt and put some Loctite back on it. Just a little strip down it. Then you can line these back up. Okay, next bolt. Just a nice little line of Loctite on that one too. So once again, this was the top one up here and the bottom one back down here. And you may have to wiggle the caliper a little bit to get it to line up. So once you've replaced the wheel, you want to thread the lug nuts on, and make sure if you're using an impact tool or anything that you at least turn these several times to get the threads started so you don't cross thread them. What I like to do next is lift the vehicle and remove the jack stand, then slightly lower the jack until the wheel is just barely touching the ground. Not too far, but that'll hold it in place while you torque it down. After that, we're going to take a torque wrench, and for this vehicle it's 140 foot-pounds, which is pretty common for some of the bigger trucks, but make sure you check your specific vehicle specifications for that one. But we're going to do the star pattern, as it's called, going every other bolt across from each other so that it torques down evenly. Don't forget your wheel key. And I always like to coat the inside of the fenders wells here with some Plasti Dip. Makes it look nice and black. So if you ever have the wheel off, it's a good opportunity. So during this process, we did not remove any brake lines, no fluid came out. There should be no reason to bleed the brakes. However, I did do a video on bleeding the brakes if you're interested in seeing that process, and I'll put that link in the description. From here, you just want to drive, and it's a good idea to go about 20 miles an hour and then come to a stop, another 20 miles, come to a stop, that kind of thing, and that will break in the whole process of the brakes mating surfaces.